How's that?
Well,
improve the quality of your lease.
Yeah, Braden, shut that off, man.
Yeah, sorry, busy. It's the middle of the day.
Go ahead.
Nobody calls you in the middle of the day.
I don't allow them to call me.
All right. What is up, and welcome back to How to Invest in Commercial Real Estate. And today we have a super awesome show.
What's that?
He's so excited.
I am excited, man. Somebody's got to bring the excitement to the show. Today, that's me. But anyway, yeah, we're going to talk about a cool topic today because it's counterintuitive to a lot of people. There's a lot of really cheap people who just don't reinvest back into the property today. And I think that's the general theme of today is how we're reinvesting back in our properties to get more value on the upside, right? Like to create more value. We're going to spend money to create more value than we spent. And there's three big ways that we're going to concentrate on today of how you can do that.
Yeah, you've all seen it. You're driving down the road, and it's like an older, rundown retail center. We call it mom and pop owned.
Call it a piece of shit.
Yeah, well, you can call it whatever you want. But people have owned it for years, and they're just siphoning the cash flow, but they're not spending any money on the building. And so they may be making money, but is there a way that they could increase profit or maximize profit through some techniques that we're going to talk about today? And we think there is. And so we've got three ways we're going to go over how to value add or increase the value of your retail center.
Yeah.
You want me to just go into them? You ready?
Yeah. I mean, I think the easiest thing before we get into the nitty gritty and start to get complicated, people understand that you can buy an old crappy house, you can renovate it for $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, and then sell it for more than $10,000, $20,000, or $30,000 than it took you to renovate it. You may create some sort of value there. So that's the exact same concept we're doing here, but with retail shopping centers. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, and it's funny because as Joel was saying that, I was thinking, you know, sometimes you can just drive down the street and you can think rent house, rent house, rent house, rent house, right? Because those people think, oh, I'm not going to put any money into that house. I'm just going to collect the rent and I'm going to be happy with that, right? But if they do some renovations, then when that renter moves out, they can rent it for a bit more, right?
Right.
So anyway.
Right. Anyway, so the first one we're going to talk about is exterior capital improvements. Exterior capital improvements.
Yeah, so I've got an example. We've just completed an external renovation on one of our retail centers here in Tulsa. And so if you're watching on the YouTube channel, we're going to have a before and after picture at some point flash up for you to see. But it was kind of an older looking center. It was like a very 1985 style on the exterior, not in bad condition. But we were having a little bit of a hard time renting certain spaces, and it's a very prominent corner, so we wanted to improve the look. And so then we have to ask the question, well, how much can we spend, and what is the benefit going to be if we do spend the money? And so it's a little bit of a math calculation that we're going to talk about. But let's talk how you do the math. So let's say, for instance, that retail center is about 45,000 square feet. And so then I can say, okay, well, if I renovate the exterior, can I charge more rent? You know,
yes.
The answer hopefully is yes. Yeah. Like you have a newer look, you're more competitive against the older centers around. And so let's say today the average in that center, let's say it's $15 a foot or whatever it is. And so then I say, well, I think I can get if I redo the entire exterior with a new look, Class A look, can I get $3 a foot in additional rent? Okay, and so let's do the math. 45 times 3.
While we're doing the math,
yeah,
right, it's easy to go into your market and do research on this because you can use a comparable location. In your case scenario, this is 71st and Mingo. So you can look all up and down the 71st corridor and say, okay, brand new retail, Class A, that looks like I could make mine look. What is that lease for? That's easy data to get a hold of. So don't use some random number that you think it could lease for.
Yeah, yeah, and
go find one.
Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
Well, it's like a house, right? If you want to renovate a house and you're going to spend money on it, then you need to know how much you can sell that house for. And how do you know that? You get comps of nicer houses in the area.
Yeah, and in Tulsa, let's say Class A retail centers, they may be renting at $25 a foot or $23 a foot. So I may not say, well, I can get $25 a foot. All I'm wanting is I'm starting an analysis with $3 a foot, which is a 20% increase in my current rent of $15 a foot.
Yep.
okay, so if I have 45,000 feet and I increase the rent across the center, and I won't be able to do that day one because I have leases, but like say over the next 2 or 3 or 4 years, that increases my NOI by 135,000. And so you say, well, what kind of value does that generate? Well, if I assume a 7.5 cap exit, that's $1.8 million if I did the math right.
Yeah.
So 135,000, I divide that by 0.075 to get a cap rate or a sale price, and the value of that income that I've increased is 1.8 million.
Yeah. So we're not going to spend the entire 1.8 million, right? We're going through this exercise to do what? We're owning the business and we're buying real estate to do what?
We're trying to justify whether I should do renovation. Mm-hmm. And so now what I have to do is I go and I get bids from contractors and say, okay, how much is a brand new facade that makes this look like a new building, a Class A retail building? How much does it cost me to do that? Mm-hmm. And, in this example, I don't remember exactly what we paid, but I think it was in the neighborhood of $750,000. Once again, we'll have a before and after.
So not $1.8 million?
It's not $1.8 million. And so then, it becomes a game of investment. Do I want to make a $750,000 investment if I think it's going to give me $3 a foot more in rent on average? And in this case, you would say yes, because the value generated is going to be $1.8 million approximately.
Yeah. So you're gonna gain about $1 million. So it doesn't take long with a number like that for people to say, oh well, you were gonna get increases anyway, right? Just because of the yearly 2 or 3% bumps. Those are never gonna add up to a 20% increase that you might get over the next 3 or 4 years. So
yeah, and the increases need to be over and above any inflationary increases that you have built into your leases. Yeah. But that's the first thing that you guys should be looking at is if you find an older center that has below market rents, you can quickly do this exercise and say, okay, that's got a 1980s look, a 1970s look even. If we put a new facade on it, how much do I think I could get the rents up to? And then you just go get bids and see how much it's going to cost. And you do the quick math and you say, okay, if I can get $2 a foot in rent, this makes sense. And that's not all that much. Maybe, you can get $4 or $5 a foot in rent. Yeah. And so that's a simple exercise that you can do that'll help give you the confidence maybe to buy an older center with the plan of improving it with exterior renovation.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on that one?
I don't think so.
I'd say make sure you have the market comp for the post renovation, right? Like I wouldn't be the person to go in and justify a new market comp. If there's not a nicer looking center with higher rents in your immediate area or trade area where your center is, maybe that trade area can't justify the higher rents. Right. So at least ask yourself that question is what I would say.
Yep.
No, that's good. That's definitely good feedback. We purchased an apartment building where guys from out of town had done all these interior renovations to the apartment units thinking that they were going to get $200-$300 a month rent bump. But they didn't realize the area of town they were in, they weren't going to be able to do that.
It's right by the gathering place, dude.
It's great. So they spent $1 million, $2 million, and they found out they couldn't get any more rent, or they got very little extra rent given the area. And we ended up buying it from them when their project failed. So
it's a highly walkable area.
Yeah, you'd think. It was a good idea. It seemed like, but
it's a good idea on paper in California.
Didn't quite do all the research. Yeah.
All right.
Next one.
So.
This is an interesting one because I not maybe know, but you hear of a lot of owners, and we look at a lot of real estate deals, and you can kind of see this on paper where owners have kept their rents too low, and they're keeping their rents low because they have no tenant improvement dollars to spend. And a lot of these tenants, when we talk about the difference in a couple episodes earlier about the difference between ground leases and pad sales and build to suits, what that does for the tenant and how fast they're able to expand based on what scenario they're doing, right? Like if they're doing a complete build to suit just doing rent, they can open way more stores than if they're spending all of their money to do it. So if the tenant doesn't have $50,000, $100,000 to remodel a suite in an old shopping center, they're going to have to go to a shopping center where the landlord will front those improvements for them, and it will in turn pay a higher rental rate, right? Mm-hmm. So it's the exact same thing as a new roof. If you've got a good-looking center, or maybe not even a good-looking center, but you've just got a vacancy, and it's a rough vacancy. Somebody needs to come in here and spend $50,000 to get a workable business in there. you need to be willing to do that. And there's math, just like we did with the exterior renovation, where it, maybe paying the tenant $50,000 to do that renovation, but you got an extra $4 or $5 per square foot in rent. That played out at scale, at sale in 5 years, is way more than the $50,000 you paid in tenant improvements, because the value of the cash flow they pay you is way more.
Yeah. So is it the same math as it is on the exterior, or is it a little different?
I mean, it's pretty similar. We have a couple different scenarios. Let's say you have a tenant that's in there and they're not sure if they want to renew, but let's say they're paying $10 a foot, and they say, "Hey, I'd really like some money to renovate my store," but they're already a tenant. They're probably going to stay anyway. As a landlord, you could just say no.
Yeah, right.
No, I'm not going to give you any money. Pay me $10.50 in rent per square foot. But another way to look at it is to say, hey, what if you gave them $25,000, $50,000 to renovate their store? Now you have a nicer suite. What do I need to charge in rent to make that worth it as the landlord? So that's the second equation that we need to work on.
And when you look at that, do you normally say, okay, I want to spend as much and get that increase in rent from them? Or do you, I guess you just try to maximize the increase in rent you can get over what you're spending and what they need. Is that right?
I think most of the time it's disclosed, right? Like most of the time there's options. Hey, I did this with the lease renewal the other day. They needed an HVAC replacement. It was like $20,000, and the lease clearly states that the tenant is responsible for replacing the HVAC. I'm like, I can replace the HVAC, but your rent's immediately going to go to X.
Yeah.
And that was, I did this calculation, and he's like, no, I'll keep it down and I'll pay for the HVAC replacement. Okay. So it's not like you're trying to pull one over on the tenant. You're essentially giving them financing options.
I see. Okay. So everything's pretty out in the open and disclosed. Not always, I'm sure.
Not always.
Especially up front.
A lot of the times, and especially the bigger, more sophisticated tenants, they definitely know. Yeah. They know.
But let's talk about a specific example. If you have a 2,000 square foot retail suite, and let's say they're at $10 just to make it easy, and they're wanting $25,000, which is $10, $11 a foot or $12 a foot to renovate their space. Okay. So let's just think about that. Well, what would I need to charge them in order to make that a worthwhile transaction for the landlord? And so let's just take $2 a foot. If I get another $2 a foot, that's $4,000 a year. Okay. Over the life of the lease, let's say it's a 5-year lease, I'm only getting $20,000 back in my pocket. So I have to think, well, it only benefits me if they lease again and we can start at the $12 a foot instead of at the $10 a foot. Right. When you take $4,000 and you put that on a 7.5 cap, if I'm going to sell the property,
the $4,000 in additional rent, the cash flow.
Yeah, the additional cash flow, if I put that on a 7.5 cap, that's $50,000 in value approximately. Okay. And so there's an equation there that says, well, okay, I don't quite get all my money back in 5 years, but at any time if I sell, and let's say the going cap rate is 7.5, well, then I'm going to get $50,000 in value. So then it's a worthwhile exercise to say, okay, not only does he have to spend it in my space, improving my space.
Your building. He's spending your money improving your building.
Yeah, improving your building. And you're going to get paid 80% of it over the life of that 5-year lease. And if you sell at the end of that 5 years or any time before that with the higher rent, you're going to get an additional 50. So that's kind of how you have to do that math.
You can also assume it's a more marketable space. Even if this tenant bails, you still have arguably a $12 per square foot marketable space. It's not 10. You did the improvements on it. If you find somebody who can utilize the use and see the value in it, that's still a $12 an hour space. Yeah. And then to your point on selling, I would expand on that a little bit and say there's a lot of people out there who don't want to sell their properties, right? Real estate is something a lot of people collect, a lot of people store value in. That's the beauty of real estate is you don't have to be selling it, and it produces cash flow. The beautiful thing about real estate is leverage, right? So at some point that loan's going to come due and you're going to refinance that. If you have this additional cash flow, you're going to be able to leverage that on the same cap rate and get additional loan dollars even if you didn't sell. Right. So it's not just about the sale. It's about every 5 to 7 to 10 years, you're going to have to recapitalize that asset with a new loan. And they're getting an appraisal, and that is based on a market cap rate and your net operating income. So the higher that is, the more cash you're going to be able to pull out of that refi. And might I add, that is tax-free because it's a loan. It's a loan, right?
Yeah, and here's another way to look at it. Let's say that you don't even consider the bump in sales price. Okay. If you're going to spend $25,000, which once again, they're going to spend it on your building, improving that space. But what kind of return do you want on that money? Let's say that you could get $3 a foot on that 2,000 square foot space. That's $6,000 a year. Okay. And so if I can get $6,000 a year in rent, well, divide that by the 25,000, that's 24% return. Okay. So who isn't going to spend a little bit of money if they can get 24% return in a year? In every year of that lease.
Yeah, right.
You have your full money back in 4 years.
Yeah, right.
But in addition, once they get used to that higher rent, you build on that over time. Yeah. So there's a couple different ways to look at that equation. And a lot of times it makes sense to offer TI dollars if you can get higher rent. So it's one thing, just, negotiate the rent before the TI, and then you know what the baseline is, and then you can quickly add TI, and you know how much you need to increase the rent in order to pay for that TI.
Do you ever worry about that the TI that they want you to spend is so specialized to that particular suite that nobody else would want to come in just like that, and then you'd have to spend more TI dollars the next time?
Great question.
That's a great Brian coming through. It's a very good point.
All right, so let's pick something weird. Let's get really weird just to prove your point. We have a 20,000 square foot vacancy, and this guy comes to me and wants to open a trampoline park and ask for $1 million.
Yeah.
Would you be skeptical of that? Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Skeptical of 20,000 square feet.
Yeah. So let's use the opposite extreme, like a grease trap, right? Like that's more marketable. Hair salons can be really funky. You get water and plumbing everywhere. You can have to bust up concrete. They put all the half walls up there. It can get really weird. So you don't want to, you're investing in this company, right? Because if they succeed, they can pay you back. If they don't succeed, you're screwed, right? And you're just left with this space that hopefully you can release. So I would want to make sure it's a marketable, leasable space without the tenant. Like without that operator, my building, what do I want my building to look like? And can I lease it out to those tenants? We're looking at that when we're acquiring them. Like, does this tenant belong in the center in this market? That's kind of weird.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that go into how we evaluate if we're going to give a tenant TI dollars, tenant improvement dollars. And, it could come down to, hey, is this space, is it bastard space? Is it old? Does it have, concrete floors and no drywall? You have to spend money in order to get a tenant in there. If not, and it's a rentable space and somebody comes in and wants, $50,000, $100,000 to make it a specialty, store. Like we spent a bunch of money putting in a kids gaming store where kids come in and they can play, Xbox and other computer games. That was pretty special.
It turned out pretty cool though.
Yeah, but it was pretty specialized use. And so really then what I'm looking at is, okay, well, how strong is this guarantor? Because I need to get my money back over the life of this lease, and I can't afford to spend all this money building it out for their specialty use to have him bail in year 2, 3, 4. So the things that we're going to look at there is the strength of the guarantor. Is if the business doesn't work, does he have the funds to pay the rent for the next so many years? And you want to lengthen the term of that lease. And so you're guaranteed that specialty use that you're paying for is there for maybe 7 years, 10 years, and that allows you time to recoup all that money back.
Yeah. Add in security measures, but you need to underwrite this business and understand that if the business succeeds, you get paid, and if the business doesn't succeed, you don't get paid. You need to be prepared for that. We build in security measures. We can have the tenant sign a UCC-1 filing statement, and that just allows us to put a lien on all of the personal property in the space. It's not always necessary. It's kind of built in the lease, but sometimes they'll lien their personal property anyway, even though they may not supposed to. So that just kind of gets it on record. And then the other thing we add is we add a specific paragraph that says these tenant improvement dollars are used for enticement for this lease. And if you default on this lease, we're going to come after you for those tenant improvement dollars. Again, if somebody's declaring bankruptcy, it's irrelevant. It's kind of more just protecting your swindler risk and stuff like that. All right, last point.
So another way to value add is to improve the quality of the lease that you have on your space.
How's that?
Well,
improve the quality of your lease.
Yeah, Braden, shut that off, man.
Yeah, sorry, busy. It's the middle of the day.
Go ahead.
Nobody calls you in the middle of the day.
I don't allow them to call me.
Yeah, so adding value through your lease. So the office building industrial is probably easy to think about, right? Because they're gross leases. They're typically paying $10 per square foot, and the owner pays for all of the owner associated expenses, like the owner's insurance, property insurance, the owner's real estate taxes, the owner's common area maintenance. So you see gross leases a lot. You see single, double, triple net leases a lot. But triple net is kind of this wide umbrella that everyone loves to say, oh, it's a triple net deal. Oh, it's a triple net deal. Every single time I look at a triple net deal, there's leases in there that aren't triple net. Every single time. Just a one-off. Somebody signed a gross lease, or somebody's like, oh, I'll cap your CAM at this, but it's like in 1980, so their CAM is like $2 a foot, and everyone else is paying $7. So making sure everyone is paying their full pro rata share of triple nets is how Precision Equity and Criterion have both added value through these retail centers for so long. And it's just easy NOI dollars slipping away. They occupy the space. They have a successful business in the space. They should be paying their proportionate share of insurance, real estate taxes, common area maintenance. And we even add a 5 to 15% admin fee. Most of the time it's 15%. If it's 5, you got a deal.
Yeah.
But a 15% admin fee, right? Because we have to pay infrastructure to negotiate those tax bills every single year to get them as low as possible. We have to bundle all of these insurance policies together into one massive policy to get buying power to negotiate with the insurance companies to get lower rates on our properties so the tenants pay less insurance. And we have to get infrastructure to competitively bid all of the vendors, make sure they get paid on time, make sure it's taken care of, file the taxes. So a 15% admin fee on operating expenses is a deal when you think about it. But a lot of landlords don't ask for it.
I've got a great example for you guys. As you guys know, I rent warehouse space just about 3 miles up. So it's fairly new warehouse space. So I signed a contract. It said I was supposed to pay for CAM charges, but they never charged it. So this guy owned it for about 3 years, and he sold it. The first thing the new owner did was start, because it's in my lease, was to add the 5% for CAM. So that's the very first thing they did. Then when it came time to sign a new lease, he turned it into triple net. And he's increasing the CAM at 5% a year, and then I'm just responsible for my portion of the taxes and the insurance. So whoever bought this has really is doing exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, and they should, right? Because these pieces of real estate are businesses and investments, and businesses and investments are built to service the owner of those businesses and investments, right? So that's what it is, and it was in your lease, and they had the right to charge it. It's a slippery slope as a landlord, though, and you shouldn't feel like slime ball, but just a reasonable conversation. Hey, your old landlord didn't charge you for this.
Yeah.
And then, sucks.
Like I said, the new lease came around, and now it's time for me to, they're increasing it because now I'm paying property insurance and taxes.
Well, and look, there's going to be people that complain about some of these measures that we're using to maximize value. We obviously want to put as many of the cost spread across all the tenants as possible. So we have the best leases geared in our favor, to make sure that anything associated with operating that retail property, the tenants pay for. They're the ones using it. They're the ones using HVAC. They're the ones that need the roof to be leak-free. The parking lot not to have holes. And so all of those costs we want to pass on to the tenant. But the tenant, they look at their base rent and they say, well, the landlord, I'm paying rent here, so they should take care of all of this. So there's a disconnect between who should pay. But the thing is, here's how I look at it as a landlord, is that we're providing a competitive environment rental situation where if they don't like it, if they are unhappy with the charges, if they can go find better space for less money, they'll do it.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you don't have to worry about what you can charge or what you can't charge. Of course, tenants are going to complain, and it's their right to complain. But at the end of the day, if you're providing a better space for lower costs, they're gonna stay and they're gonna pay. And if you're not, they're gonna leave. And so you can be an overbearing landlord without any tenants. But if you're 100% occupied, that's telling the market something, is that you're providing a product and a service at a price that's competitive. So it doesn't matter if someone complains, because it's a good price overall anyway.
Yeah, I can tell all our listeners it's a lot more fun being on the landlord side than the tenant side. So I encourage everybody, be on the landlord side.
Yeah. Well, hopefully
be on the owner side.
Future landlords or current landlords listening.
And if you're a tenant listening, I'm sorry. We're just trying to maximize profit.
No, they're getting all the insider tricks and how to
they'll know how to negotiate.
I was pissed at my landlord.
I'm not paying no triple nets.
Yeah.
I don't see no levels.
Brian said, I don't pay triple nets. I don't pay admin fees. These guys said it.
Just a few ways that you guys can all be looking at retail deals. when you're driving by, how could I maximize the value of this? Someone isn't taking advantage of these things. And so that's an opportunity for you to make an offer, put an LOI in, buy it, and improve that value, and then you get the profits and the rewards.
I'd say that's how you know you have the itch too, because that's when I'm in the car, it's literally just looking at pieces of real estate. Oh, that's a piece of shit. I wonder what you could do with that. Oh, that'd be cool here, man. If they did this in this building, that would be sick. Like there's this old at 6th and Utica, there's this old big brick industrial warehouse that looks like a mill silo. I think that would just be the coolest office space. Anyway,
well, when you lease up the office space in Owasso,
it's fully leased,
including the 3rd floor.
Yeah, shit's leased. It's just not subleased. All right, we will catch you next time on how to invest in commercial real estate. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.